Welcome to the Chronicle of Phil. Today, I want to talk about the Fire Emblem series. Recently, I got a Game Boy Advance SP, and wanting to go on a grandiose adventure, I decided why not check out one of the entries of Fire Emblem on the Game Boy Advance. When I got my Game Boy Advance, something clicked. I had a desire to visit the first Fire Emblem game to make it to the West. I was familiar with Roy from Super Smash Bros. And Lyn from Fire Emblem Warriors, where she's a bonus character you can unlock. When I first unlocked her, her unique fighting style instantly made sense to me, and I quickly began to gain more interest in her character. Who was she? Why was her design so different to the more medieval designs of her series? What was her story? This growing interest is what led me to discover her game and was the initial motivation of playing it. This interest was enough to endure the permadeath, hours of careful strategy, and the fear that I would get to the end of the game and have a completely underbuilt army. But was it even worth it? Or has the newer games made this experience completely obsolete? Well, with the recent release of Fire Emblem Engage and the soon re-release of this very game on Nintendo Switch later this year, this is the perfect time to ask the question of whether or not Fire Emblem is worth playing in 2023. So, let's find out. Now, the gameplay is obviously the reason you want to play the game, but I feel it'd be wrong if I just completely skipped over the story. The story gives purpose to the game and gives the player motivation. Motivation that one will need if they are to complete this 30-hour experience. But is it good enough to keep the player engaged? I sure hope so. With my main interest branching from the protagonist Lyn, I was pleasantly surprised to realize that the first third of the game is dedicated to her story. The game begins 6 months after the murder of Lyn's parents and tribe. Lyn belonged to a nomadic tribe along with her parents until bandits came and killed them all, Lyn being the sole survivor. Lyn is beyond her mourning and is beginning to live her life again. That is until she discovers you, the player. The player's character in the story is a tactician with the default name of Mark. Mark is a wanderer who is injured but found by Lyn, who nurses him back to health. Once Mark is healed, the two are immediately attacked by bandits but fight them off. Lyn, seeing the potential of Mark's tactical skills, invites him on a quest to avenge her tribe and kill the bandits who robbed her of the one she loved. The two of them set out on their quest while meeting many other characters on the way. Two of these characters happen to be Knights of Caelin, Caelin being one of the smaller territories on the continent of Lycia. The Knights reveal to Lyn that she is of noble birth and that her grandfather is the last of her family and is ill. She decides to accompany the Knights and travel to her grandfather. However, her grandfather is not naturally ill. He's being poisoned by his brother who seeks the throne. When this brother discovers the existence of Lyn, she is marked for death. Lyn and her company must fight to defeat her granduncle and save her grandfather and his kingdom from her granduncle's evil rule. This whole story acts as the tutorial section, and although not unbelievably original, it does provide a short narrative that gives enough character and region building to have the player understand the nature of the world. It works as a great setup for what's to come in the main story as well. The rest of Lyn's short story provides a simple enough narrative that I thoroughly enjoyed and helped build her character while also adding backstory to the main portion of the game. I don't want to spoil anything, because if you're watching this video, you're probably already considering playing the game. But, like I said earlier, Lyn's story is only 1/3 of the game. What are the other 2/3, you may ask? The other 2/3 is the story of Eliwood. We all know Eliwood, right? No? Well, if you don't know, Eliwood is the father of Roy, the guy from Smash Bros. Melee. That one anime sword fighter character with the red hair? Yeah, that's him. One detail that I should have mentioned earlier during Lyn's story is that Eliwood actually befriends Lyn. So this isn't the first time we've met Eliwood. I just don't want to spoil too much. Now, the Fire Emblem series does this a lot, so there's no surprise that there's a time skip at the beginning of Eliwood's story. His tale begins a year after the events of Lyn's. In this story, Eliwood's father, Marquess Elbert, has gone missing. In search of him, Eliwood reunites with Lyn and his childhood best friend, Hector. Hector is featured on the cover art of the game and completes the main trio of the story. And when it comes to Hector, I've always had a soft spot for him. He's always supportive and ready to die for his friends. The epitome of an honorable knight in shining armor. While they look for Eliwood's father, they uncover a dragon cult planning for total domination of the continent. Honestly, pretty intense stuff. I want to stop there because it's really something you should play yourself when it comes to the story. Like I said earlier, Eliwood's story is the majority of the game, and besides the combat, the game is almost akin to a visual novel. So if you don't enjoy reading text and watching static characters, this game may be pretty hard for you to enjoy, because that's basically what all the story scenes are. And trust me, there's a lot. Luckily, I didn't mind, and I had a really fun time. So maybe the story was just alright to you. But a good story is not the main reason you're here. The main reason you're here is for the gameplay. So if you're new to this series, let me give you a basic rundown on how things work. I like to think of it like a game of chess. There is a chessboard and chess pieces. The map in the game is like a chessboard. It's a grid you can move your units across. And the units are like chess pieces. Now, like chess pieces, not all units are the same, and each has unique abilities that can be used in different situations. However, unlike chess, instead of you moving one individual piece and then your opponent moving one individual piece, you instead move all of your pieces at once in a turn. Then it's your opponent's turn and they do the same. Each piece has a limited amount of spaces it can move dependent on stats and that unit's class. Now, to move your piece, or as they're called in the game, a unit, you select your unit and you'll be shown highlighted squares. Blue highlighted squares indicate that you can move to that square and perform an action. Actions include stuff like taking a health potion or using an item. The red highlighted squares indicate that you can fight an opponent. If an enemy unit is in a red square, you can perform an attack action. Melee units must be on a square right next to an enemy to perform an attack. However, units with ranged or magic abilities can be as far as 7 spaces or more from an enemy sometimes. When you perform an attack action, a fixed animation will play of the units dueling. You have no control over them and can only watch the scene play out. Basically, it's like a random dice roll that's dictated by your unit stats. However, if you're like me and you don't want to waste any time, there is an option to completely skip battle animations. This will make it so that you automatically just skip to the end results of each encounter. So, when you attack, your unit strikes first. Afterwards, however, the enemy units are given a chance to counter-strike. Battles play out just like this as well when enemy units attack you. Now, each unit has a certain amount of health points. When you attack them successfully, you can start depleting them. However, you won't always get a successful attack. The outcome of battle relies on 2 main factors: classes and the weapon triangle. Classes are roles assigned to each unit, like Knight, Thief, Archer, Pegasus Knight, Lord, Mercenary, and Mage, to name a few. Each class gives a unit different skills and weapons that they can use. Depending on the enemy you're facing, you can have an advantage if you choose a unit that plays into their weakness. For example, you could be facing a knight with insane stats that makes almost all attacks by melee weapons or arrows pointless. However, this knight more than likely is weak to magic, so you'd use a mage against him. Another example would be if you had a crazy powerful melee opponent who could kill a unit in one move. You would use ranged units to combat him. Also, the more you level up the unit, they will be given an opportunity to be promoted to an even more powerful class, giving a great feeling of actual growth. Now, like I said earlier, an enemy does get a chance to perform a counterattack. However, if a ranged unit attacks a non-ranged unit, they will be completely defenseless and unable to fight back. You get the picture. The other main factor that plays into combat is the weapon triangle. The weapon triangle is basically the same concept as rock, paper, scissors. Swords beat axes, axes beat spears, and spears beat swords. If you're always mindful of this, you can use it to always have the upper hand in battle. The game even tells you when you have an advantage in the triangle via these arrows. There are also other rules like this in the game, like how archers absolutely destroy any winged units. But for the sake of simplicity, we won't go into all that. You will often find that the weapon triangle and the classes often come together to form the most ultimate strategies. Overall, I gotta say, the combat is extremely fun. Except for one thing. The game is excruciatingly hard. I cannot begin to tell you how many times I died and died and died again. This game is classic Fire Emblem. If you're unfamiliar with this series, Fire Emblem has permanent death, or permadeath. What this means is if one of your units dies, they are gone for the rest of the game. They don't come back after the level ends. They are gone for good. This means if you're like me and want to play through the entire game with every unit, you will have to restart the level over again every time a unit dies. This becomes a problem because some levels can take around 30 minutes to an hour. Having to restart can make a level last upwards 2 hours sometimes. I definitely became frustrated. This is probably my biggest complaint of the game. Now, if you're a hardcore Fire Emblem fan, you're probably saying, Phil, that's the entire point of the game. That's what makes it fun, the challenge, the risk, and the rewards. You're just upset because you suck at it. And to that, I say yes. As much as I love this game, I'm kind of terrible at it. But even though I'm garbage at the game, I don't want to put it down. The story, the characters, the art design, and the combat, while excruciatingly hard at times, it is so satisfying. Even though I saw that game over screen so many times, I don't regret playing it. However, I must be completely honest with y'all. Originally, when I would lose a unit, I would start the entire level over. However, doing that made progression unbelievably slow. But then, I found a way to essentially cheat the game. When you're in the middle of a battle, you can temporarily save and exit. Basically, if you need to get off in the middle of a battle, you can exit the game and resume where you left off when you get back. After I discovered this, I abused the hell out of it. I used the save feature before almost every encounter I had with an enemy. That way, if I died, I could turn off my Gameboy and go back to the temporary save I just made. It made the game so much easier. I could make risky moves, and if they played out poorly, I could go back in time and try a different strategy. This way, I wouldn't have to restart the entire level over again. While this isn't the ideal way to play the game, it was essentially the only way I could play it without going insane. I understand this will seem horrible to many, but I thought it's important to mention this because the entire video is about whether or not this game is worth playing now, in 2023. There are new Fire Emblem games out there that have casual mode, a mode where units come back to life the next level if they died the previous one. This way, you don't have to restart the level if you lose a unit. Basically, it makes the game way more accessible to new players and new gamers alike. This is a series that I love, and I want others to love it too. This difficulty level is a roadblock to those who want to get into the series but don't have hours to waste trying to figure out the best strategy. The lack of a casual mode is the main reason I struggle recommending this game to others. The fact that I had to use that exploit says a lot about the game. Well, or me. But I think you see my point. Unless you plan on using this exploit or using save points in an emulator, this game will kick your butt over and over again. But if you like the challenge, it's there. So, after all that, was the game even worth experiencing? To a certain degree, yes. The gameplay, the story, the characters, all of these were worth it. However, the gameplay can be experienced in newer Fire Emblem games, and those games will include casual mode. But this game really strived with the characters and story. Even though I struggled and I died over and over again, my struggle made the story feel real. I felt like I was struggling right alongside the characters, and the battles carried weight. It was quite a really cool feeling. So I have this love-hate relationship with the difficulty. On one hand, it makes the story feel significant, but on the other hand, I can't fully recommend this game because of the difficulty. So that's my main issue. Unless you're willing to use exploits or save states, this game is kind of hard to recommend flat out. But if you love long RPGs, you can dedicate the time to this one, and it's a great game to do that with. So if you're looking to experience Eliwood and Lynn's story, you can do so on the original Game Boy Advance cartridge or the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack. Those are the only legitimate ways to do so. But if you're getting to the Game Boy Advance library, this is such a great game in that library. With over 50 hours of gameplay, this game is just such a quality experience, and you won't find many games like it. This game is one of the reasons I love my Game Boy Advance. And I hope you will consider playing this game so that you can love it just as much as I do. If you made it this far, thank you. This video took way too much time to make. Obviously, my hair overgrew itself. But if you have any thoughts or criticisms, I'd love to hear them. Thank you for tuning in to the Chronicle of Phil.